Hey guys, GWS here to do the presidential debate analysis that I started 4 years ago. So I'm going to continue our precedent for doing that today. Let me just make sure my stuff is working, and it is. So right now, this is what the current election map looks like according to the RCP approximations. Um, we've had very few changes over the past month, but the title of this video is what are we gonna expect from the debate? What are we gonna expect Trump and Biden to hit each other on? A lot of it's gonna be predictable because of course you're gonna have COVID, you're gonna have some recent stuff like the Hunter Biden stuff or investigation stuff. Of course, you're gonna have Supreme Court as a topic of conversation. It's going to be hosted by Chris Wallace. Chris Wallace is very, very skeptical of Trump, to say the least. So here's kind of what I expect from Trump's side. I expect Chris Wallace to ask Trump about a lot of broad, sweeping, non specific questions about, for example, COVID 19, such as him saying it is what it is. And there's going to be a little bit of stuff like that there. Um, and so, in terms of the COVID stuff on that front, I think Trump is going to continue doing what he's done both at his rallies and interviews. He's going to have a stat sheet, and this time he's actually probably going to be reasonably prepped. Um, he has to clean up his terminology, though. That's a little bit problematic. He's not very precise in talking about facts, figures, numbers, statistics. So, if he's going to win on this front, he has to be more precise. He has to be more controlled. He has to, do basically almost the opposite of what's worked for him. And in general, I'd say being brash is good. But if he's going to go with the strategy he's playing, going with COVID, he needs to defend his record, which he has the ability to defend his record. The question is, will he do it? Like, there's going to be some criticisms, and a lot of those may be legitimate or not. That's not for me to judge it within the framework of a debate. The point is that Trump, Trump doesn't automatically win or lose on COVID. A lot of people think Trump is going to automatically lose on this issue, especially those on the left, and you're going to be surprised, I think, at what he comes up with. Is he going to turn it into a small negative or even a small positive? Um, it's tough to say. It just depends on his approach. It depends on how Biden presses him. Um, and what's going to be interesting, aside from the COVID, they're obviously going to talk about the races. It's like, how is Chris Wallace going to frame the protests? Is he gonna try to take a middle ground and use something vague like racial violence or racial unrest? Is he gonna go with the protest route, or is he gonna go with the dangerous riots route? And a lot of this is going to, you know, Trump needs to be prepared for basically all three avenues because Chris Wallace is definitely capable of going all three routes with this. So if he goes with the protests, then what Trump needs to do is he needs to separate the protesters who are legitimate, who have the right to protest, who have free speech, and who may be talking about racial issues. Trump has come out in condemnation of what happened to George Floyd, but he needs to separate that, and he needs to almost legitimize the legitimate protests at least acknowledge, if nothing else, like what they're angry at, and then the steps he's taking, his administration's taking through law and order. Because that's ultimately, because everybody wants cops, but nobody wants bad cops, right? If you look at the Pew Research polls, you know, almost nobody really wants to defund the police. And there's a few radical politicians who are trying to restructure the police. They kind of use muddled language and they double talk on it, but most people don't want police defunding. That is purely an anarchist point of view. So that's that. If Trump goes the middle ground, I'd say he needs to go on the attack of Joe Biden and Democrats, talking about how basically Joe Biden is trying to hold this country hostage by saying this is a problem caused by Trump and I can fix the problem. You know, because if Trump were to argue it properly, he could demonstrate that there's not a lot of control that a president directly has over the severity of certain protests, riots, whatever you want to call them. And if Wallace goes, basically gives Trump a freebie there, basically calls them violent riots, I'd still say put some pressure on Biden, because you got to put pressure on Biden. That's going to be the number one way Trump defeats this perception people have of Joe Biden, of him being this calming grandpa influence. Basically bring up the fact, they need to bring up Biden's record on crime in the past. He needs to bring up all those past votes and how he ran as a tough on crime Democrat in the late 80s, early 1990s. He needs to talk about Biden's political record and basically go with how he defeated Hillary Clinton, basically labeling her as a standard establishment do-nothing politician. Because what Joe Biden's trying to do is he's trying to say, I'm the one to fix the problems. And it's like, if Trump doesn't press on this establishment thing, then he's not going to get, it's not going to be as good of a night as it could be. And then I think Trump, again, needs to talk about the positives of what he's done for communities. Again, he needs to talk about law and order, the things he's going to do to stop the crime. Maybe not quite go into National Guard and other extreme things. Like, I don't know how much saying, I wiped out these protests in an hour with my National Guard troops is going to help, because what people want is stability and what people want is peace. And sending National Guard, it doesn't sound a lot more peaceful than the protest. Basically Trump needs to present that image of stability, of ultimate stability to the people, and give people more of a positive outlook on that. And then, in general, what does Biden need to do? Biden, to me, it's going to be all about coming out clean. If Biden comes out clean, then it could be a little bit hard for Trump to close the gap in the polls. We don't know the validity of the polls, but the polls are what they are. So, in the very least, if Joe Biden can show that clarity and temperament, because I think in terms of this view of him being a moderate, people are more sympathetic to that. Moderate and compromising, bipartisan, getting things done. That's kind of what I think people expect from Biden. That's the image he's presented, and I think he has gotten the quote, "Who would I want to have a beer with?" type of vote that Bush had, like that famous question between George Bush and John Kerry, like who would you rather have a beer with? It's a stupid thing, but it's like it does matter because people want somebody they can identify with, somebody they can emotionally connect with, and I don't think Trump is always good at that. So it's like Biden needs to have that role, and if he wants that role, he needs to clean up. Whether or not he can do it is up for debate. That's what the debates are for. We're going to find out because if Trump is going to be Trump tonight, he's going to test Joe Biden, and he's going to test him in a very serious way. Because you got to look at this. The problem for Joe Biden, and the reason why my prediction's going to go the way I think it's going to go, is because he is completely untested. The problem is that Joe Biden won't take questions from right-wing media. He won't take questions from Fox. He won't go on Fox. He won't. He won't be accountable for anything. He barely goes out in campaigns. He barely answers questions from anybody. And when he does, he screws up badly to the point where he doesn't even remember some of the destinations of his trips because there was actually a hot mic where he was asking, where are we going or why are we here, kind of thing. So there's that. And another problem for Biden is, I'm not going to claim Trump is like the brightest crayon in the box. I think he is smart where he needs to be smart. I think he understands issues to a competent level. He's not the smartest person, but people greatly underestimate Trump's intelligence. He is a fairly smart person, but I don't see that in Joe Biden. What I see from Biden is somebody who is very well connected, who has a decent amount of understanding of emotions because he was the fun guy in school, right? He is the guy a lot of people just wanted to hang around because he understood the social hierarchies. And that's what I think his political career has been. He knows how to go along to get along to go along, however it goes. But and in terms of that, especially with how his intelligence has degraded over time, it's difficult for me to foresee Joe Biden being able to hit Trump in the way he needs to hit him, especially on issues like COVID, maybe on race. I'm sure they're going to have some zingers for him, but I think Trump is going to come in prepared like he did in 2016. I think he's going to put pressure without being overbearing and arrogant. And what I predict is a resounding benefit for Trump in the debates. People go into debates sometimes. They ask for a winner and a loser. And I just want to talk briefly, like, this is not really what debating is all about. Like, there's no real winner or loser to a debate. Unless like it's very explicit in terms of agreeing to who's doing the scoring. But even in those instances where there's a method for declaring a winner, it's entirely arbitrary and opinionated. Like ultimately, the purpose behind the debate is to see how people react when their opinions are put under the pressure of opposition opinions directly, where both parties can challenge each other in a controlled environment where they can't just um, necessarily have the best response on them. And the point is to see how robust somebody's thinking is, to see how ironclad their logic is. That's the purpose. So ultimately, what you should get out of these debates is not a winner or a loser. What you should get is who's going to benefit electorally, right? Who in the swing states especially is going to swing. Ultimately, I think when a lot of people hear what Trump has to say in a controlled environment, in a way that's not spun, it may not be spun. I mean, MSNBC interrupts basically everything to spin. And Fox News actually does recently too, so they're all bad regarding that. So there's going to be spin. But the question is, who's going to win? Who's going to win the election ultimately? And to me, that determines who is the real winner of the debates. And you'd never really know it until after the election. Because in 2016, like, you had such a mixture of opinion. You had the quote-unquote scientific polling from the major networks saying Hillary Clinton won all the debates. And then you had the actual polling, like a lot of online polls. Yes, some of them could be hacked. That's true. But you had that saying overwhelmingly Trump, almost every poll. So the point you should take home from this is, like, think of this just in terms of appealing to swing voters. And also kind of understand, too, this is just going to be a reality, but I'm going to be the one to tell you this. I don't think these debates are going to matter that much. I think what's going to get people ultimately is the quality of advertising. And I've said this for 2 to 3 months now, is that it's going to come down to advertising in October. And probably your occasional, like, October surprise. Whatever's going to come out about either candidate, there's going to be stuff, probably on both, that come out next month or on the eve of next month. We already had the stuff on Hunter Biden. We already had the stuff on the Durham report. You know, there's a lot of this stuff coming out, trickling slowly, but there's not really a lot of big stuff yet. We'll see if there's anything big. But anyhow, that's my pre-debate analysis. I predict that Trump is going to come out. I think he's going to gain, I'd say maybe an average of 1.5 points in the following couple weeks after this debate. And we'll see how he does in other debates. And we will see if I am right. Thanks for listening, guys. God bless.